Learn the most advanced recruiting techniques. Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with Rick Girard.
Creative thinking must be a premium for your company, and it starts with building the right team. Today we're talking about having a strong team and the importance of how to build it properly. My name is Rick Girard, and welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. Our purpose is to provide solutions to solve the most difficult hiring challenges to secure best talent to ensure your company's success. Today, our guest is an expert in building outstanding companies. He's an entrepreneurial thrill seeker and company builder, Carey Ransom. Carey, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be here.
And by the way, I love the tagline, entrepreneurial thrill seeker and company builder.
Thank you.
So Carey's also an accomplished startup executive, having served in C-level positions in multiple startups, including CEO of Real Practice, a venture-backed marketing software services company, which he sold in 2012 to Reach Local. Impressive. Nice. And he spent over 6 years as an adjunct professor at Vanguard University and currently serves an investor and advisor of several organizations such as Any Meeting, Payoff, Bolsey Media, and is a board member of Octane OC. So, wow, Carey, when do you sleep?
Every once in a while, but it's a fun way to spend my days.
Yeah, I hear you. So I was reading on your LinkedIn profile, and you mentioned that you have a founder attitude. So I want to dig into that a little bit. What exactly is a founder attitude? How would you describe that?
Sure. Great, good question. So the way I think about it, and for full background, I grew up in a family business that is currently 145 years old.
Oh, wow.
And so it was founded, always has been in my family. But as I thought back to that, I grew up watching my grandfather and my father and some other family members work, and I learned a tremendous amount from them.
What type of family
this
business?
This was a retail lumberyard hardware store.
Okay.
Independent family business in a community outside of Indianapolis where I grew up.
Very, very cool.
And neither my grandfather nor my father actually founded the business.
Okay.
But something had been passed down that clearly they were owners of the business, but they really embodied what I think about as a founder. And in their case, they did own it. But my belief in the kind of world that I've lived in for most of my career, which has been startup to early stage and growth technology companies, that mindset is completely transcendent to that as well. In many cases, as you think about the startups of today, people that join all along the way are given equity. That's a big part, that promise of the value that can be created.
That's the icing on the cake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in many cases, I've done this multiple times in my career where I've gone into a startup and taken a significant current compensation pay cut because I was believing in the equity and the value that could be created by getting the right group of people around the right opportunity at any given time. And so as I think about that, in many cases, there's this belief that the only people that can have that attitude are the people that were there at the inception, that were there from day one. And I just don't believe that. I think that a founder mindset can exist at any point and really comes down to more of an attitude and a way of thinking and working that really, if you're a CEO or a founder of a business, you want more of those than less. You want people who think like owners, that think like somebody who was there when the idea was germinated, want to be additive to it, want to really act quickly, want to think about this as much bigger than themselves. It's not a job. They're a part of this game change or this mission that people are being called to come together to execute against. And I think the people that can be those other carriers of the torch, and that's the way I think about it, is those people that want to be the evangelists both within the organization to remind people, why are we here? What is the greater good or the greater challenge that we're trying to solve? And also can be those people on the outside that become those evangelists that attract more and more of the right people to the organization. And so as I think about, there's that conventional wisdom out there that sales is everyone's job. I also tend to believe that recruiting is everyone's job as well. And so those people that think like founders they're going to have that competitive spirit that says, let's go get the best possible people we can on our team. And so that's where I really think about that founder attitude as something that I've really tried to have through all the things that I've done, whether it's call it a for-profit or nonprofit situation. How can I make things better? How can I inspire others to want to have that amount of commitment and buy-in as well?
Got it. So what would you say would be kind of the key elements for that founder's attitude?
I wrote a post on this a couple years ago, and I ended up summarizing it. I used the acronym CARES. You know, these people that seemingly just care more.
Sure.
And so, the words that I used around that, one was commit, this idea of commitment beyond what maybe others who just look at this as a job.
Sure.
Act, in that people that would just act and would go above and beyond. You know, there's just those times where you see something that needs to get done, and they just go do it. You know, there's a hole, jump in it and solve it. Don't just point it out for others.
Absolutely.
The third would be recognize, and recognizing that my behavior as a founder, or that others are going to be paying attention to that, and that this is an obligation but also an opportunity, and to look beyond themselves. The next is to evangelize.
Okay.
And be that, I mentioned that earlier, but that person both within the organization. Why are we here? What's the most important thing? That it's not, evangelism typically allows people to be selfless and think much beyond themselves and bigger than themselves, and take that outside to get other people excited about it.
Yeah, and it shows the passion that you have for the company as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then the last is share.
Okay.
Which is to be willing to share your time. I think founders tend to be a little bit more willing to share time to grow others.
Yeah.
They're not so focused on their role. They're focused on what needs to be done right now, and then what needs to be done in the future, and do we need to grow others to take on that role so that they can go be deployed into something else. And so those were the summary of 5 key elements that I wrote about a couple years ago. But I think it's something that can evolve. But that attitude is something that I really try to promote, and frankly try to uncover when I am interviewing or recruiting key people to a team.
When we when we had a conversation last week, you have another one you could actually add to that, which was creativity. You had mentioned that, and which is kind of where we got the title, whereas there's not really a premium on creativity as much anymore, right? So, hey, you can have cares.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So how does creative thinking then kind of come into play when you're developing a team?
Sure. Good question. So I have thought for now probably 15 years that there's a single element that I look for over anything else when I'm recruiting. And it gets to creativity. But the element or attribute that I really try to uncover in people is this innate sense of curiosity. And I think what I've come to conclude is that curiosity breeds this desire to continue to learn, to continue to evolve. And it also breeds what I've consistently found as a somewhat sense of humility. And that, to me, is where creativity can come from. When someone feels like they know it all and they've learned it all, they often, I think, start to become a little more closed-minded.
Well, you probably have the wrong person for the job.
Well, very likely.
Yeah.
Very likely, especially in the fast-paced world that we now are in around technology, where a playbook that may have worked in one business at one point in time and space may or may not have any relevance to the way business is being done now. And that could change in not decades, but even in a matter of years. And so when I see curiosity, that humility that often accompanies that, really starts to give me a sense that this person is going to be a creative problem solver, because they're going to be willing to look at things from multiple angles.
Yeah.
They're not going to just say, oh, I know exactly how to solve this because I've seen this before. They may be open to the idea that may have worked then, but there may be some other ideas or other solutions that need to be considered now. And so it's hard, I think, to get to creativity. I mean, there certainly are creative types, right? Your designers and your artists, and some that just have that natural sense of creativity, but there are people that maybe aren't that artistic that actually are super creative because of that curiosity to learn and to explore things from multiple angles and an open-mindedness that makes them very additive into a situation where creative solutions or creative problem solving needs to happen. Maybe they have a point of view, but they're willing to actually take a complete counterpoint of view just to try to make the problem solving effort as high integrity as possible, where every option has been considered. And those are the kinds of creative types that I think are really, really valuable in organizations today, where the biggest breakthrough ideas are coming from those kinds of interactions as opposed to this conventional state approach.
Well, that also brings into play the desire to do something to advance their career. And the person who's already done all that, just to jump back to your point earlier, is called an advisor, right? You want those people on your board, you want them helping you out because they'll help you not make those mistakes. But the person that you want is the person who can bring that intellectual curiosity. They're still passionate about advancing their career.
Sure. And I think that's absolutely one element that, how much ambition do you still have? Although, it's funny, I take a lot of meetings to talk to people about potentially advising them.
Sure.
And I've done a lot of things, but I also have this strong ambition to continue to grow, continue to learn. And sometimes I'm interested in advising someone because it's a new space that I actually don't know a lot about, which on its face you might think, well, then there's probably not a lot of value that you could add. But just that engagement with somebody and challenging them could be very helpful.
Well, you do add a lot of value, and you've made a lot of the mistakes in the past that they're probably going to make without you, right?
That's right. And always happy to share those. But what I find is there are certain types of people from a personality fit that just work, that are really open, that are really curious, and think I'm on the right path, but I need to get a lot more input.
Yeah.
And then there are others that are just headstrong and stalwart, that it's going to be their way. And I often find that I'm not a good advisor for them because they're not going to listen. They don't really want to hear. They really just want more encouragement than they want advice. And that's great too, but they just need to understand that really what they're just looking for is encouragement.
Yeah.
And you can get that in a number of different ways. But if you're truly looking for someone to challenge you at every turn, then you need to find that kind of advisor, and that's not everyone. And sometimes those personality fits are good, and sometimes they're not. And I think that's also, when you think about hiring, that hiring for fit is really important, because there are some cultures that can be really broad in their ability to tolerate a lot of different personality types, and there are others that aren't.
Yeah.
That is a little bit more narrow as far as how things get done. And I've always found that I tend to be a little bit more open in how tolerant I am of different behaviors, because I try to look at the underlying output as opposed to the personality. But there are a lot of people that really do get more fixated on the personality of the people and want a more homogenous environment. And I'll tend to argue that you're going to lose some creativity when you do that.
Absolutely. So, and we're going to talk about the how-to in a minute here. So we're talking to Carey Ransom about the importance of building a foundation for creative thinking when developing your team. We need to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the steps to take to build this team.
You're listening to Higher Power with Rick Girard, giving you access to recruiting techniques that will help you hire key talent to build your company towards real success. Rick is a recruiting executive and entrepreneur who's been successfully recruiting in the aggressive Silicon Valley technology landscape for the past 2 decades. After a very successful stint at Apogee, he founded Stride Search in 2012. Based on a lean efficiency model, Stride has uniquely positioned itself as a leader in retained search for the most critical talent hires within a small organization. Whether you're a startup executive or recruiting professional, by listening to Higher Power with Rick Girard, you will walk away with skills to help you attract and hire great talent. Now back to Higher Power with Rick Girard.
Welcome back to the Higher Power Radio Show. I'm your host, Rick Girard, and our guest today is Carey Ransom, entrepreneurial my tongue is not working. Thrill seeker and company builder. I love the tagline, by the way. Sorry, Carey. I had to plug that again. So before the break, we were discussing the kind of founder attitude and the importance of creativity in building a team. Now we're going to break down what needs to be done to build a successful team. So let's talk about really the context of a startup, right? Which is, we're talking about founder levels. Now that we have a bit of a foundation set, or we have an idea, what steps do we now take in building a strong team?
Sure. The challenging thing, and I had this in an email exchange over the weekend with a founder who's starting to think about, what do I do? I have
Sure.
the beginning of a product, and I'm trying to figure out where to go from here. And I typically will start at that level, at this idea of, we all have certain things that we're good at,
Sure,
and certain things that we're not. And so most likely you're going to start first with certain types of skills that either aren't your natural strength, or things that you think you need to complement you, ideally for the foreseeable future.
sure.
And it could be you just don't have the time to do it, or you particularly aren't that good at it. And then the other sort of vector I would say you need to put through your analysis is, what are the core capabilities of your business that you feel like you need to do better than anybody else? That proverbial idea of, like, what business are you actually in?
So the founder that you were just talking about, at what stage was that person? I mean,
This is really early,
pre-funding,
pre-funding,
okay.
even pre-product.
Got it. Okay.
And I'm not saying at that stage you need to focus on hiring, if you will, but you certainly want to start planning, and I would even
Building a
say
team, like
documenting. Yeah, you may do it. I mean, I've seen some great founders that end up with a team of 5 to even in some cases 10 people that are doing things on sweat equity, part-time, and just trying to contribute to move things forward, because this founder has recognized these are just things I simply can't do. I mean, if I look at myself, I can't write code.
Yeah.
I've been in
Nor can I.
in the software and internet world now for 20 years, and there definitely have been moments where I wish that I had been able to do that,
Sure.
because things weren't moving as quickly as I'd hoped, or something was, that was the bottleneck. But I've played every other role that you could possibly play in a startup except writing code. And so now after all these years, what I've learned is I need to have some really high trust folks that at those earliest stages, if this is a business that is going to require code to be written, that I can go to and I can get them involved early on in the process. And you see that a lot, I think, around here, that you have people that have a really interesting business idea, but the biggest impediment is they don't know anybody, or they don't have anybody that they can trust yet, that they can rely upon to ship that first version of the product. And
Sure.
so they need somebody who can build it or write the code. And so in some cases, they need to probably do that self-reflection of, should I even start this? Should I be starting another business? But for the people who have gotten to a certain point, let's say they've gotten to a point where they've figured out how to get that.
They've gotten the funding,
least,
and they're actually, actually this show came to be because of the question of, all right, you get funding, you have all this content about how to get funding, now what?
Exactly.
Right now, how do you build a team?
And that's where, go back to what we were talking about a couple minutes ago, which is understanding yourself. I mean, when I taught at Vanguard, a big part of that whole class was about helping people to really understand who they were. And I think we all spend far too little time understanding who we are as people, what helps us build our energy, what actually takes away from it, how do we surround ourselves in a company with people that are going to be the contributors and the encouragers and help us maintain that high level of performance and energy. And so as you think about growing your team, you want those people who are going to be able to take what you were doing and not necessarily do it your way, but do it better as you start to give up
That's a
certain
key point
things.
right there.
That's
Do it better than you would do it, right?
That's right.
So basically taking your skills and augmenting them, making them
That's right.
strengthening
Yeah.
it. Right?
So and I like that idea of searching for those people who can do it 10 times better. And that doesn't, I will challenge that a little bit and say, it doesn't always mean that they have to be able to do it 10 times better on day one.
No.
But they may have the raw horsepower, the raw intellect, some of the energy. It could be somebody that's just going to be passionate about this one thing, or is able to channel that passion into that one thing for this phase of the company. And so you bring in someone that's maybe not as experienced, but has really high energy and can move quickly. And so they'll find that 5 to 10 times better way to do it that wasn't necessarily the way I was going to do it, but that given the chance, they're going to go grab it and seize it. And that's where, to me, that idea of that super curious, passionate person is someone I may err toward hiring over somebody who has a huge amount of experience in those early stages.
Got it. So knowing who you are is basically this first step in actually identifying the company culture.
That's right.
The values of the company, right? So then next, formulate a plan, figure out where you need to augment and where you need to build around.
That's right. So if you have a product, and most cases the biggest challenge you are going to have now that you have a product is how do you show that this product can actually turn into a business?
Yeah.
And does that mean that you need to figure out your go-to-market strategy and what is the market positioning? How are you going to take this to market? And
but let's assume we've got all those in position, right? Just from a hiring perspective, so we build this, right?
So now we need to build a plan.
We've got all that.
Yeah, now we need to build a plan.
Yeah.
If you as the founder are going to do all the go-to-market aspects, then you probably need to hire in the other areas of your business. You may need to hire an administrative and customer support, maybe in some product support areas. But if you as the founder are not going to do a lot of these go-to-market aspects, then you ideally are going to need to hire in those areas.
Yeah.
And so really to me it's about this plan of what are the most important things for the business to turn it from a product, if you will, or service into an actual high growth business. What are the things that you need to learn, and then go figure out what are the skill sets that you need to go out into the market and recruit and bring in.
So I would argue with that a little bit,
Sure.
not so much on the skill sets. Skill sets but the strengths that you need to bring to the table tend to be, you can focus in and around the impact that person can bring.
Sure.
Right. So a little bit different. So utilizing, referral networks and identifying people who share your creative vision. Just step back, follow a process. When you do start to interview and you do start to bring people in, make sure you're impressive. You've got a structure in place. Nothing worse than kind of just, as you're starting to grow your company, not having some sort of structure in place and just haphazardly going after it. And then my point, and then I'll let you continue on, hire for career growth. So find somebody's what they're not getting out of their current company, and make sure that you're that Band-Aid to help heal that cut or wound or whatever you might have.
Yeah, often. I mean, it could be that they wanted to manage people, and this is an opportunity for them to come in, maybe initially as a player, but it's an area that needs to grow. Let's say I've hired a salesperson before who had strong management capabilities, but had not been given that opportunity, and brought him in initially as the quote-unquote player, but we jointly agreed that
and that guy performed really well for you, didn't he?
He was fantastic.
Yeah.
And my commitment to him was, once you help me prove out the model, then we'll work together for you to recruit the team in that you can then coach.
Yeah.
And you can do both, and it worked great. And so I think there absolutely are opportunities to bring in people that have, and again, that level of commitment and passion that he showed, knowing that this was going to be a good career growth, personal growth opportunity for him really aligned well and everyone benefited.
And you hit on a key point too. You know, when somebody feels like you're impacting their career in a positive way, I bet you the whole money issue really wasn't even that big of a sales piece of it.
That was not a significant part of it.
Of the onboarding.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So what should a kind of quick snapshot be? Like, what, you know, if you benchmark it, you're just starting to hire a team, you're looking at about 180 days out. What should you see?
Sure. So I think those early days, I mean, it depends on how many people you currently have. As soon as you have a couple people in an organization, you're starting to develop a culture.
Yeah.
And so as you start to look out over a 6-month period, I would try to write. I really love the idea of writing the press release at some point out in the future to sort of articulate, like, this is what we want to be 3 months out, 6 months out from now, and be able to tell this story and then develop a path to try to get there. And so if you're trying to articulate that in some huge customer win or some amount of revenue growth or some sort of award, you know, maybe you say, you know, I want to be considered one of the best places to work in our area, and that press release that is anointing that, then you start to have to really be forced to say, okay, what are the things that we need to do to actually achieve that?
Yeah.
So we need to put the right, to your point earlier, structure or processes in place so that people feel like there's a little bit of governance and maybe some value statements that you need to lay out and say, this is what we stand for, and use that as a screening device. So when people are interviewing, they're being asked to say, does this person seem to have these same values, and can they demonstrate in things that they've done in their past that they carry those values? And again, I tend to err on the side of culture. So I'm a big believer in bringing in people that you can develop into the skills in many cases, and especially and I've spent most of my career in those earlier stages where I am a bit of a contrarian when it comes to these really well-developed job descriptions, because I think things change so rapidly, especially in those early phases in the first couple of years of a company, that committing to somebody that this is exactly the job you're going to do, maybe that's good for the first week or the first 30 days,
it never works out that
but
way,
you want somebody that's, in those early days, you want somebody who's really amenable to change and flexible
the job
to doing other
should
things.
Be just, you're going to wear a lot of different hats.
Exactly.
Man, this show runs out of time real quick. So we're almost out of time for today's show. Carey, thanks again for your time investment on today's show and sharing your knowledge with the Higher Power Radio community. Now, what would be the best way for somebody to get a hold of you if they want to reach you?
Sure. I'm very out there on social media. Probably the best way to find me is on LinkedIn.
Yep. And you have some great blogs in there too, by the way.
Thank you. I don't get to write as much as I would like, but always happy to connect on there and have conversations and, enjoy meeting any kinds of diverse people.
Excellent. So I want to thank our listening audience for tuning in to this week's episode of Higher Power. A quick thanks to our team, our engineer Paul Roberts, our producer Andrea Ballin, Haley Stern, Shanti Ryle, and our executive producer Kim Iverson. To listen to this show and any past episodes, you can check us out on Higher, that's H-I-R-E, powerradio.com, or Higher Power Radio on iTunes or Google Play. For the latest insights on the show, follow us on Twitter or Facebook page at Higher Power Radio Show. Tune in next week as our guest will be Brian Montes of KEB Business Consultants, and we will be really drilling into compliance science of the hiring process. I'm your host, Rick Girard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power with Rick Girard on OC Talk Radio.